Well, there was no competition for Ontario wines back then, and I wanted to start something which showcased the best that Ontario could produce. And over the 25 years, things have really expanded, and we're getting a lot of entries, 400 entries from VQA wineries across the province. So it's really been quite a run.
I do a morning show at 105.7 Easy Rock here in Niagara, and it is my humble pleasure to be amongst so many brilliant people. You grow the grapes and do the wine, I drink it. So cheers, everyone. We also want to mention that if you are taking pictures tonight and posting on social media, we would love for you to tag us here so we get some recognition. On the menus, you will see the hashtags that you can use. It's hashtag 2019 OWA. Or ONT Wine Awards, at ONT Wine Awards, okay? So just if you're tagging anybody, please tag us this evening. It's at this point that we are going to read a note from our Lieutenant Governor of Ontario, who could not be with us tonight, and this is from Elizabeth Dowd-Zebwell. It's been said that winemaking is both an art and a science, relying on ancient tradition, contemporary skills, and the bounty. This province's winemakers create a unique expression of Ontario for the world to enjoy. I commend the Ontario Wine Awards for its 25 years of promoting viniculture excellence in the province. Long may your efforts continue to burnish the reputation of the many hundreds of small businesses, farmers, restaurants, and thousands of workers who dedicate their livelihoods to growing a more prosperous province. Tonight is an opportunity for the greats of Ontario wine scene to chart the future, and I wish you all the very best for a productive gathering and an enjoyable celebration. Yeah, thank you. We'd also like to thank our dinner sponsors tonight, Amcor, FCC, My Brother Station, News Talk 610 CKTB, Niagara College's Benchmark Restaurant. Isn't this a beautiful room? Yeah, absolutely. And our friends at Kojiko are here tonight. They're the ones that are filming, so all of you keep it clean, all right? I'd like to thank Steve Gill from Niagara College providing the sparkling wine served during the reception. It was delicious. Thank you, Steve. And thank you to all the winemakers for bringing their favorite wines to share tonight. It's going to be a yummy night for sure. What was that, Sue-Ann? Yum Yum Red, Yum Yum White. All right. We'd like to call a few people up to say a few words at this time. Dr. Dan Patterson, who is the president here at Niagara College and our host for our commemorative dinner tonight. Dr. Patterson.
I will be mercifully brief. I just want to welcome everyone here to the Benchmark Restaurant and the home of Canada's first teaching brewery, first teaching winery and artisan distillery. What an extraordinary night. I'm very humbled to be in front of this amazing group that have built the wine industry to make it so world class. It is totally humbling, and I want to shout out to Tony Aspler and his team. They have been extraordinary in putting this together, and I know throughout the night people will be mentioning about his leadership and that of his team. And talking to Deborah, she said, let's make this really relaxed. It's about fun and fellowship. So tonight, let's all enjoy this amazing opportunity to hear some great stories and let history unfold. God bless everyone. Cheers.
I'd like to call Katarina Radcliffe, Manager of Communications, VQA Ontario, please.
Hi, good evening. I'm Katarina Radcliffe. Thank you so much for the invitation to be here tonight on behalf of the VQAO and our board of directors. I'm so pleased to be here to have the opportunity to thank Mr. Tony Aspler and the entire team at the Ontario Wine Awards and to congratulate them on their 25th anniversary. I'd also like to thank you for your tremendous support of the Ontario wine industry over the last 25 years. We're truly grateful for your support. And of course, I also want to thank and congratulate all of the winemakers here tonight. You know, due to your dedication and your tremendous talent, we've been able to prove that we can make world-class wine right here at home in Ontario. And, you know, for that, we're very, very proud, and I personally am very proud and humbled to be in your company tonight. So thank you very much, and thank you for having me, and cheers to the next 25 years.
The Executive Director of Marketing at the Wine Marketing Association of Ontario, everybody, it's Silvio Gaitis.
Tony has given me 1 minute, so I've promised him that I'm going to be able to do this all in 1 minute. I wanted to start off by saying that Aristotle once said, "Excellence is never an accident. It's always the result of high intention, sincere effort, and intelligent execution. It represents the wise choice of many alternatives. Choice, not chance, determines your destiny." Your intention, the winemakers that are being celebrated here tonight, your intention, your effort, and intelligent execution has been recognized in your selection as Ontario Wine Awards Winemakers of the Year over the last 25 years. Because of your commitment to excellence, Ontario has succeeded in building a $4.4 billion grape and wine industry, taking its rightful place on the international stage and earning accolades for Ontario's world-class VQA wines. Your excellence makes it possible for us to tell a very compelling and inspiring Ontario wine story. Two members of the WAMO team that are on the front lines of telling that story are here tonight, Magdalena Kaiser and Doug Beattie. On behalf of the Wine Marketing Association of Ontario team, it's a privilege to be here tonight to honor you as legends of winemaking in Ontario. We congratulate Tony on the 25th anniversary of the Ontario Wine Awards and his rich legacy of recognizing, promoting, and celebrating the excellence of Ontario's VQA wines and winemakers. He's an unparalleled champion of the Ontario VQA wine industry. To Tony and to all of the Winemaker of the Year Award recipients gathered here tonight, congratulations, we salute you. Thank you for all that you do. Enjoy the evening.
Thank you, Sylvia. And now the gentleman who not only loves a good glass of wine, he likes a good donut at Tim Hortons too, and I can attest to that because we ate donuts together. Founder of the Ontario Wine Awards in 1995, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Tony Aspler.
Thank you very much, Laurie. Well, this is quite an occasion. I mean, to see you guys here all together just makes my heart leap. You know, as a wine writer who has been writing for over 40 years, my cellar used to be French, Italian, Spanish. Now it is Ontario. Believe me, I'm drinking Ontario like never before. And I'm urging everybody else to do that because what you guys are doing is spectacular. I don't think you get enough recognition within the province in terms of consumer support, but what you're making will stand on the tables of the world without a blush against anything that anybody else makes anywhere in the world. I truly believe that. Okay, what's going to happen tonight is during the course of the evening, the winemakers will be getting up to say a few words about their best and their worst experiences in making wine in Ontario. So that should be quite a hoot. So in the meantime, please enjoy the wines that you have. I'd like to remind you that tomorrow is the last day to enter the Ontario Wine Awards, so I hope you all got your entries in. And Wintario, the consumer aspect of the competition, will be actually held at the conclusion of George Brown's Wine Symposium on June 24th, at which Her Honor, the Lieutenant Governor will be presenting the awards for the Lieutenant Governor Awards of Excellence in Ontario Wine there. So, without much further ado, I'd like to call on, I'd like to mention and acknowledge those who are unable to attend here this evening. J.L. Grew, Anne Sperling, Jean-Pierre Collat, Marlise Byers, and Brian Schmidt, all of whom are past winners. And sadly, of course, we lost 2 award recipients in the past, John Marinis and Carlo Negri, but I'm sure they're up there with a glass in hand, looking down and smiling benignly on the community. So, I'd like to call up the first winemaker. The first winemaker to win this award was Herbert Conselman. So Herbert, would you come to the podium, please? Now, this year we initiated something new, which is a Lifetime Achievement Award. And Herbert Conselman is the first recipient of the Ontario Wine Awards Lifetime Achievement Award. And Sadie, I'd like Sadie to come up and actually present it to you and say a word about the man she loves.
Oh my. Well, my goodness. I didn't expect that. Herbert, it's true, you are the one I love, and you've always been, for me, the epitome of everything great about Ontario winemakers. You have always exemplified the best of every aspect of Ontario winemaking, always.
Thank you.
And I am so proud to call you friend. Thank you.
Is that the 90 second now?
Yes. You've got your 90 seconds
Okay.
and your 15 minutes of fame.
Okay. I make very short. Good evening. I emigrated to Canada in 1984. That means 35 years in Canada. And as I came, I planted 16 varieties in Vitis vinifera. And when I think back in the 80s, as I tasted the wines from Ontario, what should I say? A low quality. But when I taste the wine today in Ontario, then it's improving very much. Mouthful, full body. And, you know, I have to look at my watch, huh? But there's not a second. You know, I can say we have here in Ontario a good soil. We have a good climate. We have the sun hours. We have the rain. We have everything. And I can say with other words, you can produce in Canada, in the Niagara Peninsula, one of the best wines from the world. And colleagues and friends, let's make a good wine in Canada, make Canada a good name. I wish you all the best. And the bad thing is, what you not kill makes you always stronger.
I'd like to call Laurie Love back to the microphone, please.
So you guys all know the rules. You have 90 seconds, right? I was going to make you all do a shot of my neighbor's dandelion wine when you didn't get off in 90 seconds, but I don't really want anyone sick tomorrow, so we'll just stick to 90 seconds, okay? Jim Warren, come on up. You're the first to speak tonight.
Thank you to Tony for putting this evening together. I've been commenting on how Tony has done so much for this industry over time, and somehow we have to find a proper way to show our appreciation. I was asked to say a few words about my greatest triumph. Well, it's right here at Niagara College. I happen to be sitting with Dan and Steve, but that's got nothing to do with it. Back about 2000, I was asked to come in and help with the starting of the program, and I agreed to do that. Well, the winery was that, I don't even know whether it's still there. It was an old barn over there, and we were going to have the students work in the barn. There wasn't very much room, and the horticultural people weren't really very pleased about the winery coming into their territory. So we made our first student wines at Lenko Winery. I was also working with Daniel Lenko at the time, so we used some of his space to make the wines. But over time, I probably complained a lot about odds and ends relating to Niagara College Winery. And I remember Steve very well saying, "Jim, this is a place to grow." At any rate, look what's happened to Niagara College. The wine program has blossomed. Distillery, cidery, brewery. I mean, this place is phenomenal. For our industry, it's just been tremendous. You also wanted to comment on my greatest disaster, and I'll make that one very brief. Winemakers never have disasters, but every once in a while something goes wrong. Paul Lezak, back in 2000, asked me to come in and help him start a fruit winery. And Paul decided to press some peaches. It was about 95 degrees the day he picked the peaches, and they were fermenting on the trees. So he started processing these peaches in an old German bladder press, and by the time the juice, what a mess, but by the time the juice got into the cold storage, it was fermenting. Well, I was too busy to be there at that time. I came in the next day, and we had, 3,000 or 4,000 liters of the most marvelous peach vinegar you've ever tasted. Thank you.
All right, Ron, come on up. Ron Giesbrecht, your turn.
90 seconds, but Tony, the watches that you gave us, there's no dots on them anywhere. You get, so actually, I have to use my other watch, but I'll keep this one on because as people tell me at home, I can't have nice things. But Tony, you've given me a nice thing, and thank you very much. Now, I'll start with the disaster, because I think that in the process of learning, and now I'm at Niagara College, and that's what I'm all about, is learning, it's always better to learn from your mistakes. And so in 1992, it was, as some of you may recall, a cool year, a wet year. There was not a lot that was encouraging coming in that year. But I thought, okay, I've got this high acid, low brick Chardonnay. What can I do with it? I'll make sparkling. The Speck brothers at Henry of Pelham said, okay, go ahead, do it. And this was a bit of an afterthought. And as sometimes afterthoughts go, you just can't do it well. So we bottled it. Everything went, it did get bubbles in the bottle. Also, malolactic fermentation happened in the bottle. As winemakers know, that's not where it's supposed to happen. And, but that was the start of what became my dive fully into it in about 99, which was Cuvée Catherine. And so after that came a more concerted and studied effort into Cuvée Catherine, which I still think is something that I'm most proud of. So I would like to thank Tony again for the opportunity to do this. Tony, you distribute these like rosebuds. It's something that we can look at, we can smell from time to time, and we can take pleasure in it. So these are milestones that are really important to us. Thank you.
And Angelo, come on up, Angelo Pavin. Your turn.
Just disasters, one after another. So I'll keep this brief. Was it your triumph or whatever worked best? For me, was, as well, I was not a youth, but anyway, one introduction to German wines and tasting these Rieslings that were aging forever. I remember one of my first trips to Germany, and they asked me to guess the age of this the Riesling. We're having dinner, and I got it wrong by a quarter century. It was a 1969 J.J. Prubenweiler Zoner. So I thought, you know, I want to try to do that. And so for me, it's one wine, the CSV Riesling, and our first vintage was 99. I thought, you know, we can do it in Niagara. We can make wines that can stand up with the best of them. And that's one of the varieties. There are others I think, you know, we can do. And we have the know-how. So I think that's the triumph for me. And it works vintage after vintage. And we've done verticals going way back to the first one, and it's still holding up. Disasters. This one is not a personal disaster. It's an industry disaster. And we never want to see it again, and we learned, and it was 2001. Right? 2001, yeah, you were here at that time. And while you're stomping them, I just thought more bentonite, right, finding. So for those who know, it was the ladybug year. And that's a learning experience. I mean, I was trained as a philosopher, okay? So you always take a critical approach. I didn't have a wine background. I taught myself. So, but that year, I was not prepared. So, you know, as Hume says, there's always black swan events in our industry. But next time, we have to be ready for it. Thanks.
Now, unfortunately, J.L. Grew wasn't able to be here, but he wanted to share a story with everyone, so I'll share that story with you now. My worst winemaking story is a cross between Steinbeck's Grapes of Wrath and of Mice and Men. During the very warm 91 harvest, I was just appointed winemaker at Hillebrand Estates and responsible for a batch of 9,000 liters of Pinot Noir, a considerably high volume of this variety during those days. Despite that, it was an incredibly warm year for the delicate grape. Everything went well until the end of fermentation, when we had an unexpected bacterial attack that offered a strong, mousy taste on the palate that would hit 5 to 10 seconds after tasting the wine. I feverishly jumped on the pile of my wine literature to find a remedy, and remember, there was no internet. Not surprisingly, there was not an obvious and optimistic solution except to use a large amount of whole milk to get rid of the nasty taste. Being a daring and dynamic winemaker, I called the local milk producer, Beatrice, or more commonly known as the Avondale Dairy in Niagara-on-the-Lake, and ordered a small truck of whole milk to arrive the next morning in front of the winery. I rapidly added the milk to the tank of Pinot Noir, which then, as you might imagine, precipitated an explosion of many pink balls before settling at the bottom of the tank in a thick layer of red cream. Needless to say that the president of the winery was not impressed with my winemaking techniques, and I had to try to convince him that this was in fact a traditional fining technique used in Burgundy. Upon returning home that night, my wife even said I was an idiot, also named Beatrice. Anyway, the wine did lose most of that mousy taste, but at the same time, it lost most of its delicate Pinot Noir taste and aromatics as well. It was eventually blended into a second label red called 1812, a suitable name for a wine that so valiantly fought a war. Dejected by Pinot Noir for the time being, I turned my focus onto the great Bordeaux varieties that were harvested in fantastic quality that year and created the 1991 Trius Red. This wine then scored the best blended red wine in the 1995 International Wine and Spirits Competition in the UK. This success was instrumental in creating a new confidence for the potential of Canadian red wine. In 1998, I was grateful to receive amnesty for my winemaking debut when you chose me, you know who I'm talking about, for the Ontario Winemaker of the Year award, the second recipient. In fact, I still wear the watch that you offered me on the occasion every day. Tony, you're good with watches. Like a good red Canadian red wine, it ages over 20 years without a scratch. Thank you for your supportive attention over the years and throughout my Canadian winemaking career. It's a great story.
My goodness, there's been a remarkable change in the industry. The quality of the wines being made today compared to 25 years ago, it's out of all proportion. And the winemakers, we have to thank them for that. They've done a spectacular job in actually improving the quality of the wines and making them internationally known. And we can put our wines up against anybody's wines today.
Derek Barnett, come on up, Derek. Let's see your 90 seconds. What do you got? What do you got, Derek? What do you got?
You know, oh yeah, is that the one? Yeah, that's right. Couldn't find an old one, you know. So, I guess from the beginning, you know, in '91 when I started making wines, it didn't take long to realize that Chardonnay was one of those things that I thought we did well even back then, and I've continued for the last 30 years, I think, enjoying, along with the rest of the industry, I think making some pretty awesome world-class Chardonnays. But when we talk about things that stick in my mind for they were triumphs, but just good days. In '94 was a pretty exceptional vintage for Chardonnay, and come '97, well aged into a bottle, we at Southwark we had it poured for the Queen at a state dinner at the Royal York. And I would say that we've had many ups and downs over the years in the wine industry, with me anyway. I mean, you know, you get good days, you get bad days, you get good years, you get bad years. That always comes back to me to be one of those special days. Being an Englishman and all, like, you know, it's it works really well. And I was sitting thinking about bad days. There's also lots of those things, you know, and if someone's going to talk about ladybug years in 2001, I got to go back to '96 and 2006, thinking of disaster years for me. They were two of the most nasty vintages that we could have ever come across for me, with rain and moisture. But that was it. But I will say one more thing about early days at Southwark. Speaking of disasters, 1992. It didn't stop raining the whole vintage, and we always made the joke of what followed the weekend. Was a sunny day, right? Every day was wet. We made a lot of raspberries move into the freezer because of our lousy weather. So we're not really talking grapes now, but still fruit. And I think what came out of that was something very special that you continue to make at Southbrook, some framboise. So not every bad thing ends up being a disaster. So thank you very much. Thank you, Tony. They still work.
The next person we're going to invite up to the mic, I have a special connection with. Her and her brother were on my morning show last week, competing with a game of Heads Up. If you know Sue-Ann's staff and her brother Drew, you know that not only are they a cool brother and sister, but there is sibling rivalry there. Sue-Ann did not get her ass kicked. I want everyone to know that. Drew did win, but there will be another matchup before the end of April, I'm sure. Ladies and gentlemen, Sue-Ann's staff.
Thanks, Laurie. And that story progresses to someone that we all know so well, too, because my brother's ego exploded on social media, and Joe Pillitary called him out on it. So Joe Pillitary and Drew did Heads Up on Monday, and Joe walloped my brother, so it was bad. So the sibling rivalry is what you do on the farm, right? So anyway, so I thought I'd start off with their stories of lows and highs. I think I want to start off with a low. When I started at Pillitary, it was I had to finish off the 1996 vintage, and I'm the eager beaver, And, only about 14 years old, of course, at the time, but anyway. And I didn't know where to start, all these wines, what to do. And so Charlie, like, what do you really, really need? He's like, Sue-Ann, I need Baco Noir like there's no tomorrow. Get that wine finished and get it bottled. Okay, no problem. Because, you're young and you can do anything, right? So go and have a taste of this 96 Baco Noir. And it's a nice segue, thank you, Derek, on the 96 year, because as I made wine that year, there were some wines that the acidity level was higher than the bricks level. The color was not too much more dynamic than, I don't know, our chairs maybe. It was pretty weak. But anyway, got it to the bottle, and it was cold stabilized. I don't know how it ever could have been cold stabilized, because the TA, I think, was like 13 on it or something like that. So it was just so horrific. And so what I thought to remind myself of that wine is I put a bottle in one of those gravity stands that you can put on top of a piece of furniture, so the gravity is off of the bottle, right? So I put it on top of the fridge. So as I came down the stairs every single morning, I had to look at this bottle of wine and promise myself that whatever I did today would have to be better than that. So that was the low. So it sold out, thank God. I don't know how. Anyway, I don't know how many refunds they had to give, but anyway. And the high is, there's, when you're in a room of greatness like we are, there's just so many great stories we all could tell, right? And I didn't know which one to focus, as you will too, right? But this story comes from the the bathroom of Pro Wine. So last the women's bathroom, by the way, the women's bathroom. So, but just overhearing two ladies talk, and one lady said, "Oh my God, I just had the most amazing wine. It was so fantastic." And the other one, "Well, what was it?" "Well, it was an ice wine." And she said, the other one, like, "Well, where is it from?" And the response was, "Well, from Canada." And like, there's just so much to that just shows to us how far we come. Here we are at Pro Wine. It's the biggest wine tasting in the world. 65,000 people come to Pro Wine in Dusseldorf. And so this wine could have been from anywhere, and yet how that person you're stupid if you don't know that great ice wine comes from Canada. I thought that just is a win for all of us as to how far we've come and our place in the world. So that's for all of us to congratulate ourselves on. So from the ladies' bathroom of Pro Wine. So anyway, thank you.
Did you see your number on the bathroom wall? That's the important thing. No? All right, good. All right, Eddie, you've got a good last name. I'm going to say it's Garenskus. Look at me go. All right, come on up, Eddie.
Hi, I'm happy to be in front of all of you new winemakers. I don't recognize most of you, but I guess I'm Eddie Garinskas. I started Lakeview Cellars in 1991. I think in that first year I made 4 wines, and of the 4 wines, one of them to me really stood out was a 1991 Cabernet Sauvignon. And in 1993, it won the best red wine at Cuvée. And I won quite a few awards at Cuvée through the years, but that one always sort of stuck in my mind because I was a home winemaker all my life. And I started Lakeview Cellars, as I said, in 1991, and to win, to me, was a real prestigious award like that, really meant something to me. And I made, I guess, a lot of good red wines later. I guess I was known as Mr. Red, Ed's Reds. And so that was my triumph. My failures, I don't remember making a bad wine, to my knowledge anyways. Maybe everybody else thought different, but to me, they were all good. The only thing that sticks in my mind is little problems that I had on the press pad. I had 2 screw presses. And those of you who know what a screw press is, it's a mechanical thing, and you got to do it mechanically. If you try to push it, you're going to pay a penalty. And the penalty is you're going to take a shower with must or grapes. And I know in one case we were doing a small lot of red wine, and I was tired. I just wanted to go home. I just pressed, and all of a sudden it just blew, and I was just red. So I guess that's my short history in the in the wine industry. Thank you very much.
Anne Sperling could not be with us tonight, but she has asked us to share one of her stories. So this is from Anne. The region makes the winemaker. It was the worst of times and the best of times 10 years ago started the 2009 vintage. We all had high hopes for a great season since 2008 had been good, not great vintage. Every week that passed, the very cool and wet weather persisted, dashing our hopes for a repeat of 2007. By the time September rolled around, the season felt physically like March. We were lacking vitamin D, feeling miserable due to the lack of sunshine. We hung into mid-October and harvested Chardonnay. Then, as November approached, we considered what to do with the cabs. At weekly berry tastings, the most distinguishable flavor was spinach. Week after week, the same thing, spinach. The weekly production meetings had the same conversations, and the conclusion, harvest now and make marginable wine, or wait and pray for a miracle. So the semi-miracle happened in December, and in spite of the continuing miserable weather, the greenness subsided and we made wine. After 12 months in barrels, we knew the Chardonnays were great, and 18 months in barrel, the reds, started to show promise. I tasted through every barrel. I could see the blends coming together, so we blended them and sent them back to barrels for another 6 months before we bottled. After another year in bottle, we released the 2009 reds after the 2010s to much critical acclaim. Those reds, along with the Chardonnays, are still drinking today, 10 years later. Every winemaker in this room can relate to a similar story. So let's raise a glass to the good times and the tough times. After all, it's our region and climate that we have made this all great winemakers in this room. Cheers.
Well, the winner of the Ontario Wine Awards Winemaker of the Year is chosen actually by the judges of the competition. There's a ballot. Each one gets a ballot, and they put 3 names down of winemakers that they would like to see getting this award, and then we just compute them, and the one that gets the most votes is the winner. Carl Kaiser. So I'd like to actually raise our glasses and give Carl the toast that he so richly deserves. Carl Kaiser. And I'd like to introduce another celebrity from the wine industry, Debbie Pratt.
Well, I'd like Tony to stay up here because I'd like to share, because this is about Tony and about winemakers. I thought it appropriate to share a Carl Kaiser story. And Magda, I know we all know millions of stories, so I don't know if you know this one about your dad. But long story short, in 1974, Zeraldo planted Riesling, Chardonnay, and Gamay across the road from Enniskillen. Sager bought it after that, so most of you know it as the Sager Vineyard. But in 1977, after only 3 years, the vines were obviously very young, and it was the worst harvest ever. It rained, and it rained, and it rained, and all the equipment got stuck, and finally it was harvested. And so Carl made his first Chardonnay from those vines, 3-year-old vines. This is a key part to the story. So in the mid-'80s, Tony had remembered about this first wine, and he was doing a tasting. And he phoned me up and he said, Debbie, he said, could you talk to Carl for me, please? He said, I'd like to use his 77 Chardonnay as an example of what a wine tastes like after 3 years, a vinifera tastes like after 3 years, in terms of structure and whatnot, and I'm going to compare it. And I, again, Tony knowing Carl, he said, would you ask him for me, Debbie? So the point was, he wanted to show the challenge of a difficult year, but mainly young vines. So I I went into Carl's office and I told him all the things Tony had said to me, and he said, oh, sure. He said, yeah. He said, give Tony how many ever bottles he'd like. And so then I said, okay. And then he said, when's the tasting? And I said, I know what you're going to say, Carl. I said, yes, I'll have Tony report back. And Carl smiled, just smiled. And all of you know that smile that Carl would give that had hidden meaning. So Tony wanted to prove a young wine and the structure that it needed to be aged a little, be a little older vine. So anyway, Tony phoned me back, and I said, how'd it go? He said, Debbie, he said, it didn't prove what I wanted it to prove. And I flashed a Carl smile, and I said, oh, okay. And he said, it stood up well, it had great acidity, and I can't believe for a 3-year-old old wine that it stood up so well. So I went into Carl's office and shared it, and Carl just nodded and went. And so it's those nods that the winemakers give us when they know more than we do, and they wait till we discover. And so it was ours to discover and yours to discover.
While we're waiting, I'd like to call Paul Bosk up. Come on, Paul. Paul Bosk Sr.
Good evening. Well, after 41 years as a vineyard owner and winery owner, there's been a lot of things happening, a lot of very good things, a lot of not so very good things, but we survive and flourish. And we're still around here kicking at an age where I should be down in my condo in Florida. But anyways, I just don't want to be too long because I could talk to you for 2 hours. But so we had not so much problems because, as we say in the trade, there is no bad years. There is only difficult years. So disasters didn't really happen, but I tell you, I still live in a fear of having this to happen. As far as the triumph, well, I think the best that I could remember is this year and last year's, because this is the year that we have on the market now. So.
So true, Paul, so true. All right, Rob Power, come on up here and give your words of advice to everybody. Come on.
Okay, it's February 2015. Can't remember the exact date on the calendar, but it is 3 o'clock in the morning. This was in the middle of this polar vortex 2, as you may recall. I'm at home in bed. We have a weather tower at our St. David's Vineyard, which is a double-edged sword, right? I always know exactly what's going on, and I always know exactly what's going on with the weather. So I can see from the forecast and what's going on there that there might be a chance to run the fan. So I get in the car, get bundled up, get in the car, come across the canal, coming down off the Skyway, exit onto Glendale, then onto York, and I'm driving along York, and the thermometer on my car dashboard says -21, and I can see that big Canadian flag at the Husky is completely limp, so the wind has died, so I am going to be running the fan. Get to the vineyard. It's a good 400-meter slog through thigh-deep snow to actually get to the fan. By the time I get there, I'm like, oh, you better start, you. So Power it up, flick the switch on, light comes up, beautiful. Okay, here we go. Turn it over once, engine doesn't pick up. That's normal for a cold fan, right? A really cold fan. Try it again, ominous click, spotlight goes off, dead in the water. So I figured I'd blown a fuse, so there I am with my cell phone light in the middle of the, the wind chill is like minus 25 maybe. Trying to find the fuse box. I find the fuse box. I'm trying to get fuses out of this panel to find which one is blown. Can't find it. It's so cold, my fingers are literally sticking to the cold metal on the engine block. Never did get the fan started. So it's hard to scream obscenities. It's hard to scream obscenities when your teeth are chattering, right? So, but so that's obviously the downside. The upside is that the wine from the vines around that block in 2015 vintage did take home an award at the Ontario Wine Awards. So, Mother Nature taketh away, Mother Nature giveth back. Cheers.
All right, Craig McDonald, come on, we can squeeze in your 90 seconds. Let's go.
Ooh. Okay, all right. My greatest triumph was a Bonneville. Okay. I ride motorcycles, just for the record, so that was a long shot. No, I'm going to start with two screw-ups because I think they're the most humbling, and I've got plenty of those. I remember driving down in 1997 to interview with Angelo, who's become a great friend and has always been a good mentor of mine. And strangely enough, he hired me, and I had a shaved head, but I had a pretty good-looking girlfriend at the time. I think that was what really did that, right? He's laughing, he knows, yeah. Anyway, no, he put me in a house with Charles Baker, which is now Talon Ridge at Le Clos Jourdain, up on the top there, across from Suan. And I was on the bottling line for about a month in the middle of August, but then I got my chance to make wine. Soon after that, it was Auxerrois was the first thing picked in Angelo's cellar in 1997, and I climbed to the top of the ladder, and the ferment was raging, and I wanted to add some fermade, and I had it in a bucket in one hand, and I got to the top of the ladder, and I kind of slipped, and the whole thing went in, and I thought, that's not good. 3 kilos of fermade in a block going into a ferment, so... and Angelo was walking around outside with his clipboard as he does, and I jumped up on the top there, and I could see the foam weaving its way to the top there, ready to volcano, and I thought it's going to happen. So I basically sat on the lid like a mechanical bull. I sat on this thing as it burped foam and sprayed the entire cellar, and Angelo came up to the edge of the cellar there and kind of looked in and then just shook his head and walked out. So my first day making wine in Canada was that. So, and I know I'm going way over, but I think that's okay. 2000 vintage with Rob. We discussed this earlier in the bathroom and both had a bit of laughter, but it wasn't a great vintage, and it was my first year making Barco Noir, which I thought, it can't be that hard. Barco Noir, even though it was vintage. But one of the worst experiences of my winemaking career was making Barco Noir and then actually thinking I could enhance it by putting in Cabernet Sauvignon from 2000 and then trying to add 20 grams of sugar because it had 19 grams of acid, so we added a heap of sugar to it, filtered it and bottled it, and then it re-fermented in the bottle again, so we debottled it. It went on for about 4 years we had this wine. We declassified it into a brand called 16 Mile Creek and tried to sell it for $8 and no one would buy it. It was absolutely the worst wine we ever made. And this is one for Rob as well because he'd forgotten about it. So anyway, so that was my worst experience. But listen, it's been great to be up here and probably the greatest moment that was winning the award with Tony and being in the fine company of you great folks. So thanks very much. Thanks.
Craig is very humble. He has won this 2 times, so well done. Yeah. All right, Thomas, I think you're my new favorite guy to bring to a party. I saw you walk in with your knapsack, your backpack full of wine, which I thought was amazing. And then from there, he just keeps bringing bottles of wine to our table. I think I love you. Yo, okay, come on up. Here you go.
So, 2008 proves that our wines do age. I was at the Clos Jardin. We had stagiaires that year, were 2 guys from Beaujolais and a Champenoise. And the acetic acid on the juice that came in after sorting was off the charts. We worked and worked, and Sébastien Jacquet, who's now doing a great job over at Megalomaniac, he said, maybe this is the year for an oenologique project. And I said, well, you know, we're doing things really pure and everything, and of course, we had to eventually filter that VA down. And so one of the highs of my life is, I mean, watching on how Ontario wines can age on, is it on the acid? Is it on the limestone? Is it on just a dry extract? I don't know. I brought a couple of the 08s tonight, the reds, Claystone and Le Clos, just to show that they're alive and they're good. It wasn't the perfect year. It's a very humbling year. But what came out of that that's very positive also was that I realized that the Clos was planted 75% to Pinot and 25% to Chardonnay, and it should have been the opposite. But nobody wanted the Chardonnay. We've heard about Chardonnay a couple of times tonight, but that was the germ of the I4C. You know, the Jugement de Montréal with Claystone was also maybe the germ, but a couple of years later we realized, you know, like, okay, like Chardonnay does well every year, and if you slightly overproduce it, slightly too high a yield in a hot year, it may be even better. So there's a lot of things to love about Chardonnay, and I think we're coming up on, what is it, the 9th I4C, and that's pretty good. So that is under 90 seconds. I know it's a rule. You thought I wouldn't. But I'm going to talk about Tony for 30 more, and that's got to be permitted. That's got to be permitted. So here we go. Tony Aspler. I started as a wine journalist, and I read his books, The Wine Lover Dines, and then he wrote books on Canada. And I learned right there and then, 25 years ago, that if journalists, and there's a couple more in the room, journalists, if they saw the good in Canada, in a new region, and didn't just slag mercilessly off the bad, they could help focus us on the inside, as well as the consumers. But for us, I like this. So Tony is a Brit. He has an international palate, but he chose to devote his working life to Canada, and he smartened all of us up on the way. That you all know, but what you don't know is when I came back from, when Mary and I came back from wine school in Beaune, we had circulating amongst friends only, which included Tony, Word document on the best BYOBs of Montreal. And Montreal had and has permis servir ou permis vendre. You can do one or the other. And Tony said, that's it. And he went to the government, and he was instrumental in making the BYOB laws happen here so that a restaurant can both sell and serve, not one or the other. Quebec still hasn't gotten that right. And I think, when I look at it, everybody in this room, there's nobody in this room that has not benefited from being able to show their wines or other people's wines they're proud of to whoever because of this man right here in a restaurant. So I'd like to give a little hand to Tony for that.
Well, the criteria for the award is basically the winemakers have to have quality across their entire portfolio of wines, also to have won in other competitions and have been mentoring other winemakers as well. So it's a composite award for quality and their commitment to the industry.
Daryl Brooker to come up and give his 90 seconds. Come on up, Daryl.
Thank you. I thought being the only non-Ontario person here that I wouldn't get to speak, but thank you, Tony. I appreciate it. I was trying to think of the worst and the best, exactly as it was described, and it took me quite a while. And I thought, should I offend everyone and say the worst experience was when I arrived and the best was when I left? But obviously that would be a lie. And I actually decided to flip it. I told you that for a reason. So the best experience, and Sue-Ann reminded me of it again when I came in tonight, was well, I was in New Zealand, and I'd been there about 4 years, and I thought, oh, it's time to go international. I'm going to apply for a job And I went onto a job website and I looked and I saw, oh, Jordan, California, Jordan, CA. That sounds good. Yeah, I could go and work in California. So I applied for this job, and I'm like maybe an hour into the phone interview, and then it came up, and I'm like, why are you talking about Niagara Falls and Toronto? This makes no sense. So what happened? Obviously, it was Jordan, California, Jordan, Canada, and I was like, oh my goodness. And so what I thought was my worst experience turned out to be the best, because I arrived and it was an emotional roller coaster. First Ed Madronich picked me up, and I'm like, what the hell have I done? And then and then I saw Flat Rock Cellars, and there was no roof on the winery. I'm like, what the hell have I done? Then I went down, I thought, well, I better meet some local winemakers. So I went down to Creekside. I met Rob, who was super friendly. Met Angry Craig, because he was fighting with Peter Jensen. But it was, and then I'm like, okay, I see why I've done this. It's the most communal, exciting wine region I've ever worked in. It was absolutely incredible. And I knew very quickly how exciting it was here. And then I thought, what was my worst experience? And I remember I left in May 2010, and I'm glad a few people brought up the '09 harvest. It pretty well broke me, and I'm like, I can't stay here. I can't go through another harvest like that. And even though the wines, Craig brought an '09 Chardonnay tonight, which looks incredible. And so my worst experience was, I remember I arrived in the Okanagan Valley, and I got off the plane, and Gordon Fitzpatrick, who owned Cedar Creek at the time, he's like, welcome, but you've got to go back and accept Winemaker of the Year. So I hopped back on the plane in a couple of weeks. I'm like, Tony, if you told me that, I would never have left. I only left because I wasn't named Winemaker of the Year for like 6 years. I'm like, how long do I have to put in? 6 years, Tony! 6 years! But I love it, and I love coming back here. So many good friends and so much fun, so thank you very much. Yeah.
Okay, Paul Pender, try and beat that one. Get up here. Good luck.
That is a hard act to follow. It's great to be here, and I've been thinking, I had a speech in my head, I thought, but I'm here, and I went to the college. I started here in 2004, and graduated in '06, and Jim Warren, who is also a recipient tonight, was one of the great mentors in my life. So thank you, Jim. It's great to be here. I never thought I'd be on the same stage as you, talking about wine, so that's great. And Conrad, I remember before I went to wine school, I was a carpenter, and I was working away, building stuff and listening to the radio. And at the time, Niagara College had just won top wine in Canada for a Pinot, and you were talking about it, and oh my God, this is amazing. I'm thinking about going to wine school. I love listening to Conrad and the CBC. Jim Warden made this wine, and it all came together that I'm going to go back to the wine school and become a winemaker. So it's great to be here in the room with you guys tonight to celebrate this. So thank you.
Wow, that's a great.
So now I start my 90 seconds. So biggest failures, I was around the winery today and asking people, like, what was my biggest screw up I've ever done here? And of course everybody had their hands up with lots of advice. But we think back to, no one's mentioned the harvest of 2014. It was a horrible year. We had, we lost half our crop during the winter, and then it was a really cold kind of year where nothing ripened. And we had our cab sitting on the vines at about, mid-November, and the acid was as high as the sugar, as someone had mentioned tonight. And thought, okay, I'm going to wait until the following week before we pick. And it was the Friday afternoon. We thought, let's wait till Monday, we'll pick. It dropped down to like -10 that weekend. And we came in on the Monday. There was this much snow. The grapes were frozen like ice wine. It was -8. But we totally needed to make table wine out of this. So we had to pick all these wines that were frozen, and we had to thaw them out for 4 days in the winery and drive around with snow on the crush pad. And everyone was cursing my name every time they saw me. Like, we could have been done on Friday. And now it took us 6 days to do 1 day's worth of work. So that was my biggest failure. But in the end, the wines were decent, And then I think one of my biggest...
And then JL started to pick.
Exactly. You waited until they thought out. We've been very lucky at times, and I feel like I've been very lucky to be part of a great team. And I think one of my biggest achievements in the wine industry has been to create a great team and to realize from the very beginning, early on in my career, that one person doesn't make wine, it's a whole team. And it starts from the crew in the vineyard to the cellar hands that come in for harvest, to everybody who kind of works with you to make a great wine. And I've been very blessed to work with a super team who are committed and dedicated and passionate about what they do. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Okay, Andre Lipinski, come on. Get up here.
Thank you very much. I just talking with Tony, I just realized that I started 94. This is 25 years and the Ontario Wine Awards, so it's going to be easy for me to remind, and I hope you're going to continue for many, many years doing Ontario Wine Awards, so it's going to be for me reminding that I started from the beginning. Well, I had many disasters, of course. I worked for many wineries, and always something happened, and especially when you start the winery, and from the beginning, I remember I worked at Fielding, and there was no walls yet. There was 2004 vintage, and it was minus 26 Celsius. All my wine freeze. I mean, all the tanks, and I know what's going to happen. You know, nobody's going to remember that. You know that this is nobody's saying that. You know this because the winter was so cold. But Ontario Wine Awards, we got 2 gold medals and 3 silvers from Tony. So was disaster what I was thinking, but on the end turned pretty good. So after many years, I opened finally my own winery, 2012, and I think this became my family also, dream, and all my family, my kids working. So, I mean, thank you for Ontario, and also for the I came '89 as an immigrant, and started working in the industry just by accident, and yeah. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Andre. Even though Jean-Pierre Collard was unable to be here, he wanted to share his story with everyone, so I'll read that to you right now. Just to remind everybody, I arrived in 2000 in Ontario, coming from a harvest in Chile. Arrived June 1st, 2000, no summer in 2000. From my arrival, and all June, July, and August, I had to wear rubber boots, a sweater, and a raincoat. And that just tells you how cold and rainy it actually was. I was about to go back to France. Harvest started late, but still, we were pretty unripe. I had to check every single tank in the winery, and coming from Chile, this was a big shock. I did not give up. I worked hard, tried to maximize everything. On we moved, specific work on press wine. A batonnage of lees on those red and barrels. Some of my existing Canadian colleagues were thinking I was totally crazy, perhaps with some reason, but sometimes hard work and passion pay off, because a couple of years after my Cabernet Sauvignon Reserve 2000 was elected Best Cab at Cuvée, despite the miserable, challenging year and my crazy approach, this was a treat. Unless I want to compete with the 2 gold medals tied in the Sauvignon Blanc category at Cuvée for the 2006 vintage, I still love Sauvignon Blanc as a winemaker and as a consumer. My biggest disaster here in Ontario. It's really short, 2 sentences. Pretty easy to remember because it was a big trauma for myself in the wine industry. This is the 2001 vintage when we first faced the Asian ladybug invasion, along with their aromatic contamination. The end. So there you go. Yeah, exactly.
It shows, when a winery gets a medal, it shows the consuming public that this is a wine of quality, and it's a quick guide for the consumer to what to purchase.
Okay, while dessert is being served, we have a couple more people that are going to come up and do their 90 seconds this evening. We're looking for Emma Garner. Come on, Emma, come up and give us your 90 seconds.
Thank you. So, trials and tribulations of winemaking in Ontario, where to start? I'll start with the high point. So that just happened actually in this last year. One of our wines won Best in Show at Decanter, so one of our small lot, Cab Francs. And as Paul was saying, it's not one person that makes wine. It's an entire team, so from the vineyard crew to the cellar crew to the winemakers that help put it together, it truly is a team effort. But not only is it our company alone, but just the entire industry and the tireless efforts that we all spend every hour, and all, like I know Thomas and everyone going internationally just to help promote our wines. So the fact that we could win a wine at that level, which is arguably one of the most prestigious competitions in the world, was really astounding for us. So very, very happy. Disastrous moments, again, where to begin? So I was out for dinner with Craig and Daryl last night, and I have to say I haven't laughed as hard as I did last night in a long while, so it was great. But for me, just thinking about it over the years, that's right, exactly. It was one of my first placements when I was down here. I was going to Brock, came down here to go to school. One of my first placements was in the vineyards, actually, at Cave Springs. I know, so another Ange story. They were short-staffed in the winery, so I had been hired on to work in the vineyard, but they needed help in the winery, so I was like, okay, sure, I'll go in. And I remember it was one of those moments where you have that lapse of judgment. And I'm looking at the valve, I'm looking at the handle, and of course, the handle should be in the same position as the valve when you take the hose off. Like, what could go wrong? Of course, anyone who's ever dealt with a hose and a valve and a handle realize it should be the other way around. So as I'm taking the hose off, start taking a Riesling bath, and I'm just dumbfounded. I'm standing there, I'm just getting sprayed, baptized by Riesling, essentially. And which maybe was the start of my career, and I could feel someone staring at me, and I turn around, and of course, it's Angelo staring at me, which feels like an eternity as I'm just getting soaked. And he just says, maybe you should close the valve. I said, okay, yeah, that's a great advice, thank you. And needless to say, for the rest of my placement, I was back out in the vineyard, which I probably was a better spot for me. So thank you for that, Ange, and thanks to Tony for putting on such an amazing evening this evening, and everyone here. It was good times. Thank you.
Some mornings I wake up and I wish that I was showered in Shiraz. Or Chardonnay, or whatever. Speaking of, Shiraz Motiar, come on up.
It's obviously it's the end of the night here, so we can get. I was actually hoping you guys would all be like really loud and ruckus and drunken, so you guys wouldn't even hear what I have to say. So, no, it's all good. I'm going to start with what Herbert said at the very beginning, which was, if it doesn't kill you, it makes you stronger. And I think that is sort of the theme that I've heard all night. I worked with Herbert. He tried to kill me, I think, but I survived and made me stronger. I worked with Paul Boss, Sr., and he yelled and put the fear in me. I think that's why he's a bit hoarse now, because he yelled so much at me. But I survived, and I'm stronger. I got the smile from Carl when I worked at Enniskillen, because he knew I knew nothing. And I still know nothing, but I know he's still smiling. Let me start, I guess, with the Triumph. It's happened twice at the Ontario Wine Awards. The hat trick. So it was with Gamay, and I'm a very strong believer in Ontario Gamay. And it was a great reward to do that twice, and to have Gamay sort of represented many times. Matt Kramer, when he came to taste amongst the group of wineries back in 2009, and he rated our Gamay as one of his top wines he tasted that year. That was 2007. That was probably a high for sure. The lows, Ladybug's 2001 probably is it. It's been mentioned enough times, so I don't have to mention it again, other than we still bottled some of the wine and then realized we could not sell it And so we ended up dumping all the wine into tank to then send away for distillation or vinegar, and thinking, well, we can reuse these bottles. So we washed them. Every winemaker knows where this is going. So we screwed 2 vintages up. But you know what? There's been so many problems that we've all experienced. Showing traveling winemakers through your vineyard, and you didn't realize you've got late onset black rot and you've just destroyed their palate for the next 2 weeks. Or thinking you've got the best barrel of Chardonnay, and then a very respected winemaker comes and goes, "This is full of Brett," and you're like, right? So I think the what I've taken from tonight, and I've had this I get to finish, right? So all these amazing winemakers have told us their stories of making wine in Ontario, and I think if you're gonna experience the most highs and lows, you can't do it in a better region than here, because Mother Nature throws us the biggest curveballs, and we fail all the time, but we learn from those failures, and I think that makes us better winemakers. So thanks to being in this group with all of you. Thank you, Tony and Deborah. It was a great evening, and Niagara College.
What? Can you hear me? Yes, okay. Well, what a wonderful evening this has been, to be surrounded by such talented winemakers and to drink such great Ontario wine. This has been the highlight of my career in wine in Ontario. I can say that quite honestly. But I would really want to thank 3 women in my life. First of all, Sadie Darby. Where are you, Sadie? She's there she is. Sadie has put together the wines for the Ontario Wine Awards ever since we started. To Sandy Kurbis, who is sitting right there. Sandy put this meal, not only put this together, but is my right hand when it comes to everything that I've done in wine. And then again, there's my wife, Deborah, who has always been with me and suffered with me and celebrated with me during my career in wine. And I want to thank you all for coming, and I hope that you will, to see you all at the event on June 6th for the presentation of the OWA Awards, and then again at George Brown College on the 25th of June for Winterio, which is the bookend to the college's wine symposium, and this will happen on the 25th of June. So enjoy the rest of the evening, and thank you very much.